Welcome, everybody. Today is Monday, the 28th of January, 2019. I'm Jake Morphonios with Blackstone Intelligence. So today we're talking about the crisis in Venezuela and the ongoing efforts by the United States to destabilize that nation in order to bring about regime change. So I want to kick off today's show by reading a part of this letter that I got today from a viewer in Costa Rica. I'll read just a short part of it here. Carolina writes this: Jake, I appreciate your efforts much more than this pittance offering indicates. I'm a retiree living in Costa Rica. This country has its own headaches and corruption, but I have no plans to leave it. I find the land much more peaceful than the United States. For me, this consideration is not a minor one. And anyway, that's all I'll read from that. So Carolina's writing from Costa Rica, right? So let's picture this. Put on your geography cap for a second. So you've got the United States, right? North America. You've got Canada, the United States, Mexico. You go down Mexico to the Yucatan Peninsula. And then just below it, getting into Central America there, you've got Belize. You've got Guatemala, El Salvador, moved down a little bit more into Central America. You've got Honduras, Nicaragua, you've got Costa Rica there, and then Panama down at the bottom before you go down into South America, right? So have you got this in your mind's eye? No? I don't blame you if you don't. Public education in the United States is not the best in the world. Public education actually took a major nosedive thanks to George W. Bush and Ted Kennedy and those other purveyors of the dumbed down, I think it was 2001, the No Child Left Behind curriculum. And honestly, it only got worse under the Obama era Common Core garbage. I know that George W. Bush probably meant well, but respectfully, the last person we want determining the education of our children would be George W. Bush. Bush lecturing America on educational standards. That would be kind of like listening to filmmaker Michael Moore lecture us on how to be physically fit. You know, or maybe watching a TED Talk with a panel consisting of Bill Clinton and Donald Trump explaining to the audience how to be, good husbands or something. It's just ironic having Bush in charge of this education thing. Bush really wasn't the brightest bulb on the tree, is what I'm saying.
Question asked, how is our children learning? As yesterday's positive report card shows, children do learn.
Anyway, let's go ahead and pull up Google Earth and take a look at what we see on Google Earth. Okay, so here we are. We've got Canada, United States, Mexico. You've got Cuba over here, Haiti, the Dominican, Jamaica. I've been to most of these places. I haven't been into Cuba, but I've sailed right past it. I've been to Jamaica and Haiti and the Dominican and the Bahamas a couple times when I was a kid living in Miami. Been to Grand Cayman and explored ruins at Tulum. But anyway, you go down here and you have Belize. Then you have Guatemala, site of some pretty bad earthquakes. El Salvador. You have Honduras. You have Nicaragua, which is this is the place that was Oliver North and the Contras, everything going on down here during Iran-Contra. Then you've got Costa Rica, and then you've got Panama. Then you get down into Colombia, and over here's Venezuela. Anyway, here's Venezuela right here. So I just want you to have this in mind as we talk for a minute. So Carolina lives in Costa Rica as an expat, what we would call an expat. An expat is an expatriate. This is someone who lives outside of the country. That doesn't mean necessarily that they are not patriotic toward the United States. The meaning of patriotism, expat simply means that you live outside of the United States for one reason or another. Doesn't necessarily mean that you are against the United States. You are no longer patriotic. But U.S. expats are not few in number. There's a lot of them. In fact, if you were to take the lowest, the populations of the lowest 9 U.S. states, plus Washington, D.C., add up all of the population of those 9 states and Washington, D.C., and there are actually more expats living outside of the United States than that population. So there's a lot of them. If we look at, though, a key finding that was published not that long ago by the U.S. State Department, it shows that since the election of Donald Trump, the number of these expats, U.S. citizens living outside of the United States, the number of expats to renounce their U.S. citizenship, it has actually doubled since Donald Trump took office compared to the prior period before Trump was elected. And so there have been some polls done asking expats about their sentiments, what they feel about taxes and all kinds of different issues. And according to these polls of the expats, a big reason for a lot of this dissatisfaction since Trump took office is because of the huge spike in U.S. interference into the affairs of other nations. They don't like it. Now, this shouldn't be surprising. Even here inside the United States, a lot of people feel very betrayed by Donald Trump on this issue, including a whole lot of people who actually voted for Donald Trump. So to put this in context, let's go back and take a look at the promises made by then candidate Donald Trump.
Moving from one reckless intervention to another.
We cannot be the policeman of the world.
We do not seek to impose our way of life on anyone. We will no longer use American military might to construct democracies in faraway lands or try to rebuild other countries in our own image. Those days are now over.
So a lot of Americans were very tired of career politicians making promises, always promising to end so-called nation building, to stop meddling in the internal affairs of other countries, because all it does is it breeds antagonism and hatred toward the United States. It often ends up putting our military into conflicts where it has nothing to do with defending the United States, but it's wars for, whether it's wars for oil or other resources. It's the practice of overthrowing other countries and setting up these vassal governments is something that the expats don't like. Really, we just go around setting up these vassal puppet governments, ones that would be more amenable to the imperialist agenda of what we are today, which is an American empire. Kind of like the British Empire before us, we are now the dominant empire in the world. So a prominent neocon who made very similar promises that Trump did to end nation building was the Shrub, George W. Bush. And Bush promised to stop U.S. meddling many times during the 2000 campaign. I remember it well because I was working in the 2000 campaign for Steve Forbes. I actually met George W. Bush on stage at the South Carolina Republican presidential debate. Immediately after the debate, I was waiting in the wing for, after the candidates, waved and everything. I was waiting there to escort candidate Steve Forbes off to take him back to the van because I was going to whisk him off to his next venue, which was a great big Amway convention. He was going to go be a surprise speaker there. But anyway, while I was waiting there, the candidate who was the closest to me was George W. Bush. And we kind of had a, humorous exchange. But anyway, Bush, all throughout this campaign, was promising that he was going to stop interfering in other nations. Take a look.
If we don't stop extending our troops all around the world in nation-building missions, then we're going to have a serious problem coming down the road, and I'm going to prevent that.
Now, of course, immediately after George W. Bush and his neocon administration took office, most of these guys, by the way, were members of the neocon Project for a New American Century. They immediately set out preparing for multiple wars in the Middle East. They were just immediately writing up war plans to invade. Problem was, there was no reason for it. So you've got this team of neocons. These are men like Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz, Donald Rumsfeld, Richard Pearl, even John Bolton was connected to them. A bunch of neocon warmongers. They've got these plans. Really, all they needed to kick off their nation-building campaign, according to an actual publication that came out of the Project for a New American Century, what they said they needed was a new Pearl Harbor type event, something that could be used to manipulate the American people's passions, something that would change our resolve to be against nation building and put us in the mood to, interfere in other nations. So they needed a great big event, a new Pearl Harbor, and they certainly got one. And immediately after that, we see President George W. Bush announcing to the entire world, basically, that any nation that did not go along with us on this, anyone who did not support our war on terror, anyone who did not support invading all these other countries that had nothing to do with terrorism, but that nation that opposed us would be considered a hostile regime as well, and would be subject to massive economic sanctions, and there would be the possibility of U.S. invasion, military invasion. So these bold threats, you would think that just a year before, he campaigned on saying, we're not going to do this, got in office, and that's all he's pushing. You would think that the American people would say, whoa, not so fast, but that's not how it worked. George W. Bush was met with almost universal praise for this idea, not just from the politicians, both Democrats and Republicans, but citizens on both sides of the political aisle supported him. So he just went out there and championed this idea of going after everybody. And if you're not with us, you're against us.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists. From this day forward, any nation that continues to harbor or support terrorism will be regarded by the United States as a hostile regime. Either you're with us, either you love freedom and with nations which embrace freedom, or you're with the enemy. There's no in between. You're either with us or you're with the enemy. That's clear. I will continue to make that clear. I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
And so just like that, public sentiment turned away from the traditional attitude that intervention in other countries was wrong, and flipped over to this attitude that U.S. military intervention in other countries was a moral duty. And all it would take for us to be justified in preemptively striking another nation or overthrowing their government, well, all we need is for the chief executive, the commander-in-chief, to say, yeah, those people support terrorism. And as the Iraq War propaganda proved, the American people didn't even require real evidence of terrorism to justify military intervention. We were bloodthirsty. People are very, very easily manipulated when they're in a state of fear. That's why false flags are so effective. Certainly, the toppling of other nations did not start with George W. Bush. We go back to the mid-1800s. And even at that early stage, the United States was intervening in scores of foreign nations. From the 1800s onward, the United States government has interfered with scores. I would say easily over 100 coups have been carried out. Interventions to either prop up governments that we want to be in power, or activities to go in and overthrow governments that we don't like and install governments that we favor. In fact, just between the years of 1946 to the year 2000, this is before the whole war on terror mess started, as the New York Times confirmed and documented, the United States government carried out at least 81 coups against foreign governments from 1946 to 2000, 81 coups. And that's just the ones that we know about. And you can find documentation on this all over the place for these. A place you can start, even though Wikipedia is not a bastion of truth. You can go and look up foreign interventions by the United States and follow the references to go to the source materials that confirm these. So here we are. We've got politicians today, right now, Marco Rubio and others, Mike Pompeo, all these people out there openly calling for regime change in Venezuela and saying the same thing, which is, if you don't support us, you are with the enemy. It's the same garbage that George W. Bush used. And here it is. It's working again. A lot of Americans, not as many as after 9/11, but still a lot of Americans today are buying into this garbage that the government propagandists are putting out about how we have to have this regime change.
We have many options for Venezuela. And by the way, I'm not going to rule out a military option. We will no longer use American military might to construct democracies in faraway lands or try to rebuild other countries in our own image. Those days are now over.
Every option is still on the table, even...
All options are on the table, everyone. The strong ones and the less than strong ones. Every option, and you know what I mean by strong.
Considering a military option for Venezuela?
We're not considering anything, but all options are on the table.
Does that mean you're considering military?
We're just, all options, always, all options are on the table.
And it's just insane. And also, while we have carried out regime changes all over the world, the majority of our, these imperialist imposed regime changes have actually taken place here in the Western Hemisphere throughout the Latin American territories. We have installed compliant governments in Panama, in Honduras, in Nicaragua. We have installed pro-American governments in the past in Mexico, Haiti, the Dominican, and so on. Some of the coups that we have carried out have been successful around the world. I mean, we look to the 1953 Operation Ajax, where the CIA removed Mohammad Mossadegh from power. A democratically elected government was overthrown by the CIA in Iran. That was a successful coup. There's a reason that the Iranians don't like America. Then again, we probably wouldn't like Iran if Iran came over here and overthrew our government and installed a puppet dictatorship. We would kind of feel the same way, I think. Another successful coup was the 2011 overthrow of Libya. We arranged the overthrow of Gaddafi and his assassination. The United States successfully overthrew the government of Ukraine in 2014, for example. So we're very good at this. The CIA has done this so many times. They're very, very good. But there have been incidents where the coups did not go as planned. And you look at the botched 1961 Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba, that was intended to overthrow Fidel Castro, remove him from power. And one of the big reasons that the Bay of Pigs failed was that this had been planned without JFK's knowledge originally. And when he learned that this overthrow, that this coup attempt, an armed paramilitary was going to be sent in with the instructions of the CIA, all these Cuban exiles were going to go in and try and overthrow Cuba, and they were promised to have all kinds of support from the United States. Well, JFK kind of botched this operation, because when it started to go bad and it was time for the U.S. military to go in and back them, JFK said, no, we're not doing this. And that really pissed off the CIA. And that was among the reasons that they ended up assassinating JFK, because he was standing in the way of some of these CIA schemes. Another botched coup is still going on. This ongoing effort to overthrow the Assad regime in Syria. That's been going on for, what is it, going on 8 years now, where the United States backed ISIS terrorists to try and overthrow the government. When that failed, they turned to backing the Kurds to try and hold the oil-rich territory, and that's not working well because we're in this conflict with Turkey right now. So sometimes these coups are absolute debacles. So when you hear news that the United States government is pushing for regime change in Venezuela, don't you accept this government lie that what is happening down there is some kind of natural, organic response, an uprising by the people because they've got this horribly oppressive government that is starving them, and it's terrible. If you are someone like Carolina who lives outside of the United States, you have this different perspective. From the vantage point of someone living outside of the United States, you can see how American imperialism is affecting other parts of the world. While those of us here inside the United States, if all you rely on is mainstream media, which is just corporate-controlled mind control, propaganda that is put together by the bankers and the multinationals that control our politicians, the very politicians who are implementing these efforts to overthrow other countries. You'll never understand the truth if you rely solely on the mainstream media. The truth is that the Venezuelan president, Maduro, yes, he's an unsavory person. I don't like him. I would never vote for him. To me, he's kind of a thuggish strongman. But the world is full of people who are not good leaders. When we have someone in power here in the United States who is not a great leader, do we want other countries coming in and saying, we don't like your president, we don't care that you voted him into power, we are going to remove him by force, overthrow your government, and install someone of our choosing to run business in America? Would we put up with that? Of course not. This is why Congressman Ron Paul always said we should have a policy, a foreign policy that utilizes the golden rule, which is you do not do to someone else what you are not willing to have done to you.
My point is if another country does to us what we do others, we're not going to like it very much. So I would say that maybe we ought to consider a golden rule in foreign policy. Don't do to other nations what we don't want to have them do to us. So we endlessly bomb these countries, and then we wonder why they get upset with us, and yet it continues on and on. I mean, this idea that we can't debate foreign policy, then all we have to do is start another war. I mean, it's warmongering. They're building up for another war against Iran, and people can't wait to get in another war. This country doesn't need another war. We need to quit the ones we're in. We need to save the money and bring our troops home.
And if we are not okay with other countries coming in and forcing our government out of power and replacing it so that they'll have a more cooperative government that they can control, if we're not okay with that, how can we be morally justified in turning around and doing it to someone else? Who are we to say who should or should not be the leader of some other country? It's not our business. It's the business of the people of that country. And if they don't like their government, they can rise up and they can fight. They can go to the voting booth and vote them out of office. It's not our place. But the reason that we keep doing this, we have what's going on in Venezuela is from the top to the bottom, from the left to the right. The entire thing is a CIA manufactured event that is designed to replace a recalcitrant leadership in Venezuela that is not doing what we want with a compliant puppet government that will kiss the ring of the American hegemons. That's what this is. So I'm going to lay out my position on this and go into greater detail in my next video. Folks, I don't think that I'm inaccurate to say that the reporting that I do will give you a much better, more balanced look at what's going on than what you'll get from CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. That's because I give you the facts. I give you both sides of the story, and I don't filter what I tell you through what would be corporate approved, what corporate sponsors or corporate advertisers would say is acceptable. I don't have CIA media censors first taking what I have to say for my show and saying, no, fix this or change this or whatever, like the mainstream media does. So I don't have corporate sponsorship. The kind of reporting I do relies on small individual financial donations from a broad spectrum of viewers. That's what makes my work possible in this reporting. So if you can spare $5 a month to support true freedom of the press, true reporting, then please visit patreon.com/endtimesnewsreport. If you're a patron of $5 or more a month, then you'll have access on Patreon to some bonus videos and some other posts and photos and things that you won't see me release anywhere else. So I thank you all for your support, and I'll have that other video out probably this evening. For Blackstone Intelligence, I'm Jake Morphonios.
Сергей Лавров отметил в интервью, что именно чинуши препятствуют этому.
Могло стоять ЦРУ. Ясно, что он заранее знал об этих атаках. 11 сентября. У меня есть страхового договора. Как только торговый этажный небоскреб, здание номер 7.
Джейк Мафониус, основатель Blackstone Intelligence, управляет глобальной сетью человеческого интеллекта. Мафониуса ищет из-за его опыта в ближневосточных делах, в том числе связи между ЦРУ и террористическими группами.
Расстрел в Лас-Вегасе стал самым массовым убийством в истории США. Возможно, лас-вегасский стрелок Стивен Пэддок, почтенному, обеспеченному господину.
В докладе ЦРУ, опубликованном следователем Джейком Мафониусом, были обнаружены секретные операции по запуску бомбы.